Breaking news. December 30th, 2025. Ukraine holds positions near Yunakivka and Khotin as Russia fails to advance. Hey, really, subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. I'm Alex. Join me with Aria in the latest deep dive by Defense Report for a sharp, no-nonsense breakdown of the latest in global defense news, military technology, and strategic developments. And today we're going to cover the new, dangerous reality facing Ukraine's northern front.
That's right. We are deep diving into the Sumy Oblast border. It's a region that, has been pretty quiet for months.
And now it's just exploded onto the military analyst maps. We're seeing near-daily Russian activity.
So our mission today is to really analyze this 2025 Sumy offensive. We need to figure out what created this new pressure point and separate the tactical noise from the strategic reality.
Because it seems like there's a lot of noise.
Oh, a huge amount. The Kremlin is working overtime to use these small, localized incursions for a massive cognitive warfare campaign aimed squarely at the West.
Trying to convince allies that the front lines are on the verge of collapsing.
Exactly. So we need to look very closely at the source material today to see if any of those claims actually hold up.
And before we get into the trenches and the troop movements, let's lay out some of the most surprising facts you need to stick around for. We're talking about confirmed operations that they almost defy logic.
First, there's this recent, truly bizarre tactical assault by Russian troops. They use formations so outdated it suggests the whole thing was, and this is a quote, designed to be seen.
So, pure propaganda, not for any real military gain on the ground.
But that theatrical approach, it comes with a real horrific human cost. We've documented the immediate consequence of one of these incursions.
Right.
The confirmed seizure and forced deportation of 52 Ukrainian civilians.
52.
Including men of conscription age, from the border village of Hrabovsky. It's a clear war crime under international law.
And when you connect that immediate abuse to Russia's long-term aims, it just reveals a deliberate strategy of, generational warfare.
It really does. You have to look at the wider context. These efforts to Russify Ukrainian children. We're talking about moving them as far away as North Korea for militarized re-education camps.
That level of institutional malice, it just speaks volumes about what their long-term objectives are.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's start with the current picture in Sumy Oblast as of today, December 30th. The good news, the thing that anchors our headline, is that Ukraine's defense forces are holding their positions near those critical settlements.
And that resilience is absolutely the bedrock of the northern defense right now. It's critical because of the strategic stakes here.
So you need to understand the function of these towns.
Exactly. The crucial logistical targets under threat right now are Yunakivka, Pisarivka, and Khotin. These are essential road hubs. They're concentration points that let Ukraine maintain supplies and move troops across that whole northern sector.
So losing one would...
Yeah.
It would threaten the stability of the others.
It would create a domino effect. Now, the Russian propaganda machine, of course, has been claiming all sorts of successes.
Trying to convince everyone at home and in the West that they've had these major breakthroughs.
Right, but the Kursk Operational Group, that's the Ukrainian command for this area, they've firmly dismissed those claims as just wishful thinking.
Okay.
They've confirmed that both Khotin and Yunakivka remain under full Ukrainian control. And that's really a testament to the local defense, which has been severely tested.
But let's talk about the defense of Khotin specifically.
Yeah.
Why is that one town geographically the most vital of those three?
It all comes down to the terrain, the concealment. Khotin is right next to a really dense, critical piece of geography.
The forest.
The forest. South of the town, stretching towards Pisarivka, is this massive forest cover.
Yeah.
If Russian infantry captured Khotin and then got into those woods,
It'd be a nightmare to get them out.
they'd become, and I quote, exceptionally difficult to dislodge. Forest fighting heavily favors the defender. Ukraine would face terrible casualties trying to force them out, so preventing Russia from getting that concealment is paramount.
So, okay, they are holding the key logistical hubs, but it's important to give the full picture here. This region hasn't been static.
No, not at all.
It's been under increasing pressure since this offensive began, and Russia has managed to occupy around a dozen small border villages, right? Like Novenka, Zurovka.
Vodoli, Lontya. These are minor tactical gains, but they represent this slow, corrosive advance throughout 2025.
And that leads us to the big question for this deep dive. Why? Why did Sumy become so vulnerable when it had been, relatively quiet for so long?
The sources point to a direct link with earlier operations. The pressure on Sumy really started to ramp up around February 19th of this year,
Okay.
and that gradual Russian advance picked up speed right after most of Ukraine's forces had been deliberately pulled out of the adjacent Kursk Oblast in mid-March.
So that Kursk withdrawal was then immediately followed by these Ukrainian counteroffensives back into Kursk and Belgorod.
The controversial Toakino-Vasiloidy offensive. And the source material is very, very blunt about how effective that was, or wasn't. Military analysts suggested the main objective reaching Glishkovo, which is over 10 kilometers deep into Russia, it was totally unrealistic.
Why? Not enough
A
troops.
severe shortage of reinforcement units. They had no way to hold any ground that the assault teams actually managed to gain.
And the cost benefit on that seems questionable, especially if some commanders saw it as a political move.
Yeah.
What did that actually look like for the soldiers?
The frustration was intense. We have this really powerful quote from a soldier who's in that offensive. He said, "We're running into the same brick wall again and again."
Wow.
It points to these repeated high-cost assaults launched without the ability to consolidate or even set up defensive lines. Some commanders said these moves were less about military victory and more about letting the command structure save face.
Or showing international partners that Ukraine was still on the offensive.
Exactly. And that overextension came with a direct, very measurable cost to the defense of the North. Combat-ready brigades had to be pulled from the Sumy border.
To go fight in Turkino
Or, even more critically, to go reinforce the really high-intensity fighting down in Donetsk, where Russia was mounting its major summer offensive.
So the outcome for Sumy was catastrophic.
It was.
Yeah.
The defense of the whole region was handed over to, quote, weak, newly formed units.
And sources said some of these units were sent in without essential gear.
Yeah, specifically, without adequate numbers of FPV drones, while at the same time, specialized Russian UAV units were actively operating there, just tearing apart what limited logistics Ukraine had.
It is just astonishing that after a year of this war, key defensive positions were still so inadequate.
Sources from 4 different Ukrainian units confirmed it. There was no continuous line of defense near Khotin or Pizarivka, just isolated trenches.
And these weren't even good trenches.
No. Troops said they were defending dugouts that dated back to 2014. They described how these positions would just flood to their waists after it rained.
And they saw the difference when they were in Russia.
A huge difference. They contrasted that with what they found in Kursk. Well-fortified, continuous underground trenches going 6 to 8 kilometers deep. The disparity in preparation is it's stark.
So let's talk about that pressure now. The highly publicized, limited attacks we saw this month in December near Kharkovsky and Setnitsky Kosachok.
Right.
I think the logical question for anyone listening is, are these moves the start of a massive, renewed northern offensive? Are they going for Sumy City?
Based on our deep dive,
Yeah.
the firm analysis is no. Russia has absolutely not set the necessary conditions for a major ground offensive in the north.
And you said there were 2 big proof points for that. What's the first one? On troop quality.
Redeployment. Russian forces have actually been removing elite units from the Sumy area since the summer.
Removing them.
Yes, including elements of the 76th VDV Division. Their paratroopers, who are crucial for these kinds of assaults, they were needed elsewhere. Huliai-Pol, Pokrovsk. You just don't remove your best units if you're planning a major breakthrough.
Okay, that makes sense. And the second point was about operational prep, the strikes that always come before a big push.
Correct. Russia has not conducted the sustained battlefield air interdiction campaign, the BAI.
And for our listeners, BAI is?
It's intermediate-range strikes. They target logistics, supply routes, ammo dumps, all miles behind the actual front line. It's their standard playbook for shaping the battlefield. The fact that we're not seeing that tells us these ground attacks have a very different purpose.
Which brings us back to those bizarre tactics you mentioned at the top, the media events.
Exactly. Take that assault at Setnitsky Kosachok. We're talking 2 squads moving in lines, shoulder to shoulder. Almost no dispersion.
Which is just asking to get hit by a drone.
It completely contradicts their own modern tactics, which use small infiltration teams. When a military acts against its own doctrine, it's a huge signal. The attack was meant to be seen. It was designed to feed the Kremlin's cognitive warfare campaign.
Let's define that. What is cognitive warfare in this context?
It's the use of information to influence your enemy's decisions and their morale. The goal here is to create panic, the perception of an overwhelming threat from the north.
To convince Western capitals the front is collapsing.
And ultimately to pressure Ukraine's allies into demanding Kyiv concede ground that Russia hasn't been able to win on the battlefield.
And these are the flag-raising missions we hear about.
Precisely. You go in, record a video for state TV, and then you retreat. You claim a seizure of territory that's really just a contested gray zone.
It's theatrical violence.
It is. But that focus on propaganda, it masks the devastating and immediate human cost on the ground. And we really need to shift our focus to that grim reality now.
The source material confirms a really appalling consequence from that Hrabovsky incursion around December 19th.
Yes. In just that small window, 52 civilians were forcibly seized and deported across the border to Russia for so-called filtration measures.
And that included 17 men of military age.
All of it. A clear violation of the Fourth Geneva Convention. A war crime.
And the sources say the Ukrainian defenders were actually hampered by the presence of these civilians who hadn't evacuated.
And the reason they hadn't evacuated is just heartbreaking. Many couldn't afford to pay rent somewhere else, especially if they'd already been displaced before. They were trapped. And they became immediate targets for this deportation campaign.
Which is part of this deliberate, cruel strategy to rob Ukraine of its people, its future.
Exactly. And it connects directly to that broader pattern of erasing Ukrainian identity. We've seen evidence of 165 re-education camps aimed at the Russification and militarization of Ukrainian children.
And these camps aren't just in Russia or occupied areas.
No, they're in Belarus and even North Korea.
That detail is just shocking.
It is. We have confirmed cases of 2 children from occupied Donetsk and Crimea being sent to a camp in North Korea, and sources noted that the counselors there were teaching these Ukrainian kids how to destroy Japanese militarists.
So what does this all mean? These aren't random acts.
These are deliberate, coordinated policies. They're designed to fundamentally damage Ukraine's future, to undermine its claim to its own people. It's a war on Ukraine's national identity itself.
But on the international stage, we are seeing some pretty robust counters to this.
We are. We should highlight the recent financial news from the EU. On December 12th, they agreed to indefinitely freeze 210 billion euros.
Which is roughly $247 billion.
In Russian state assets. It's a staggering figure.
So what's the plan? What are they going to do with that frozen money?
The plan is pretty ambitious. The EU is going to use those assets as leverage to give Ukraine a massive reparations loan, up to 165 billion euros.
So about $194 billion.
But here's the crucial detail. Ukraine only has to repay that loan if and when Russia pays reparations first. It insulates Ukraine's finances while keeping huge pressure on Moscow.
That is some strong, coordinated support. And it contrasts so sharply with the state of any peace talks.
There are no real talks. The Kremlin continues to reject all the key points of the international peace plans. Their stance is that Ukraine must concede territory.
And not just any territory, specifically unoccupied territory.
Exactly. They are demanding the entire fortress belt in Donetsk Oblast. For our listeners, that's the network of fortified defensive lines Ukraine has held since 2014. It is their primary defense. Russia is demanding territory it cannot seize militarily.
Conceding that would be a strategic catastrophe for Ukraine.
It would basically just set up Russia for a much more successful offensive down the line.
Just to escalate things further, the Kremlin used that alleged drone strike on Putin's residence.
Which Ukraine immediately refuted.
To say they would revise their negotiating position and, pick their own targets for retaliation.
Which just raises immediate fears of more systematic attacks on civilian energy and infrastructure, right as winter is deepening.
So, at the end of the day, the situation in Sumy illustrates this critical dynamic. Ukraine is succeeding. They're holding strategically vital towns like Yunakivka and Khotin.
Yes, despite this immense strategic overstretch that Russia has caused with its offensives across the entire theater.
And you can pretty much summarize the Russian strategy in the north as either coming at an immense human cost through these war crimes, or
it's just theatrical. It's designed to pressure the West into demanding Ukraine concede ground that Russia can't actually win. It's a strategy built on deception and exhaustion.
In fact, that focus on deception really highlights the strategic struggle over resources. Russia's military is stretched thin. They're having to pull elite forces away from the north to prioritize advances in the south and east.
And for you, the learner, the key takeaway here is that Ukraine's success in holding ground in one area forces Russia to make these really difficult choices about which other sectors to deprioritize. It keeps the whole front dynamic under pressure.
So the ongoing struggle is as much about manpower and financial durability as it is about who holds what village.
It's a war of endurance, played out through geography and finance.
You've been listening to Defense Report by Alex and Aria, where we analyze the latest in military strategy, global defense, and advanced weaponry. Subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. We'll catch you next time.